If you're trying to lose weight without cutting out any foods you enjoy, learning how to count macros is the easiest way to do it. Now, I'm not saying it's the only way to lose weight, but after 12 years as a dietitian and helping hundreds of clients reach their weight loss goals, I can confidently tell you that it's the quickest and most efficient way. When you learn how to track macros, you can easily adjust your nutrition based on a lot of your goals that you have, and you can have complete control over your results. Basically, understanding macros gives you a personalized fat loss formula or blueprint. So if you want to learn how to calculate your own fat loss formula and start tracking macros the right way, keep watching. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Andres Ayesta, and if it's your first time tuning in, I'm a registered dietitian who teaches busy professionals and working parents how to lose weight by transforming their nutrition, their fitness, and their lifestyle habits. And on this channel, I show you how to do all of this in a way that still gives you time for your family and help you crush your career goals. So if you're a busy parent or busy professional trying to balance it all, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when every new video goes live every single week. Now let's get into our topic for today's video, which is showing you how to count your macros to reach your fat loss goals. You may have heard about counting macros before, but if you're not sure exactly what that means or how to get started with it, this video is going to walk you through the whole process. So even if you're an absolute beginner, you're going to know how to count macros and start crushing your fat loss goals by the time that you're done watching this whole video. So let's dive right in. When your goal is fat loss, the first thing you need to understand is what it means to be in a calorie deficit. No, a calorie deficit is not a diet, it's just a state. Basically, this just refers to eating less food than when you're burning on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. When this happens, your body uses stored fat for energy and you'll lose weight. Think of managing your weight like balancing a seesaw. On one side, you have the calories you consume, and that's everything you eat and you drink. And on the other side, you have the calories that you burn through activities like walking, working out, or even just breathing. To lose weight, you need to tip the seesaw so you're burning more calories than when you're consuming, creating a calorie deficit. To gain weight is the opposite. You need more calories on your side of the seesaw, creating a surplus that makes you side dip a little bit lower. If you want to maintain your weight, you have to balance that seesaw perfectly. What you eat and what you burn are equal, keeping the seesaw level and steady. The principle of energy balance is at the heart of most diets. Whether it's keto, fasting, paleo, or various detox type of plans, they each aim to create a calorie deficit, though they approach it differently. For instance, keto focuses on high-fat, low-carb foods to change how your body uses energy, potentially reducing your appetite and calorie intake. Fasting, whether it's intermittent or extended, limits the time or the amount you eat, again leading you to fewer calories consumed. Paleo emphasizes whole foods and eliminates a lot of processed items, which can naturally lead to eating fewer calories due to the satiety and lower calorie density of a lot of these foods. Detox diets often involved liquid-based nutrition, inherently reducing calorie intake by simplifying what you consume. Each of these diets use a different method, but essentially they all tilt the energy balance seesaw towards the calorie deficit, leading to weight loss. Now that we understand that, we can now dive into macronutrients, which is the breakdown of the calories you consume split into three: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. When you track macros, you calculate how many calories you need to eat every day to make sure you're in that deficit. Then those calories will be broken down into the three main macronutrients we just discussed. When you hit those macro targets, not only will you make sure that you're in a calorie deficit, but if your goals are set correctly, it's also going to help you manage your hunger levels so you can lose weight without feeling hungry and restricted all the time, while also maintaining balance in your diet, feeling energetic, and recovering well from your workouts. Now, the first step that you need to take to get started with tracking macros is determine what your calorie goal is that puts you in that calorie deficit. But to do this, we need to figure out how many calories your body's burning on a daily basis to exercise, to move, and run all the systems and processes in your body. This really depends on your sex, your body type, your weight, and your genetics. Then once you have that number for your daily energy expenditure, which is also known as TDEE or total daily energy expenditure, you set a daily calorie goal that is going to be below that number so you are in that deficit. Now, TDEE is a combination of different things. So let's break those four main components. One is your basal metabolic rate or BMR. This is like the amount of fuel your body just needs to keep the lights and the engine running. Imagine your body's a car parked in a garage. Even when it's not driving anywhere, it still needs energy to power essential functions like the engine's idle, or in your body's case, keeping your heart beating, lungs breathing, and maintaining body temperature. BMR accounts for the largest chunk of your total daily energy expenditure, which is roughly anywhere between 60 to 75%. The thermic effect of food is the second piece. Eating food itself burns calories, like a small engine revving up each time you fuel up. This is because your body uses energy to digest, absorb, and process nutrients in your foods. TEF, or thermic effect of food, accounts for about 10% of your TDEE. Third is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. This includes all the activities and movements you do throughout the day that are not considered formal exercise. These include things like walking to get a glass of water, typing, and even fidgeting. It may not seem like much, but together, these can add up significantly, contributing to around 15 to 30% of your TDEE. And the last one is your exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT, which is the energy you burn through planned physical activities like jogging, swimming, gym workouts, you name it. The contribution, or EAT, to your TDEE can vary widely depending on how active you are. Now that we know that breakdown, I'm going to show you a simple way to calculate your calorie needs in a very simple way. But before we get there, I want to give you a little overview of what macros are. Macronutrients, or macros, are the three main nutrients your body needs in larger quantities. They're protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and each one play a very important role in your overall health and performance. Protein gives you the building blocks for tissues, enzymes, and hormones, and supports muscle growth and repair. Good sources of protein include things like chicken, fish, tofu, eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, just to give you a few examples. Every gram of protein gives you about 4 calories. Next is carbohydrates. They're your body's primary energy source. Sources of carbs include things like fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, and like protein, every gram of carb gives you about 4 calories. And finally, fats are essential for so many body functions, including hormone balance, nutrient absorption, and cell structure. Now, most of the time, you want to choose unsaturated fats from sources like avocados, nuts, and olive oil. Fats typically have 9 calories per gram, so they're a little bit more calorie dense than your carbs and your proteins. The process of tracking macros involves counting and balancing these 3 main macronutrients to achieve your specific goals. Let's take this tuna sandwich, for example. This tuna sandwich, let's say, contains 20 grams of protein, 40 grams of carbs, and 10 grams of fat. Here's a piece of math that you will always want to remember. For every gram of protein, you get 4 calories. For every gram of carb, you get 4 calories, same as protein. And for every gram of fat, you get 9 calories, which is more than double what you get from carbs and protein. If we go back to the sandwich example, 20 grams of protein times 4 will give you 80 calories. 40 grams times 4 will give you 160 calories from your carbs. And 10 grams of fat times 9 will give you 90 calories from fat. If we add all this up, this sandwich contains about 330 calories. If you look at any nutrition facts label, if you know what the macronutrients are that are displayed there, you're going to be able to get the total calorie intake without even having to look at it. Now, the question that many people ask me is like, but Andres, why should I track macros? Well, this is the way I explain it. By understanding the amounts of protein, carbs, and fats your body needs, you can create a nutrition plan that is tailored to your unique needs. Whether you want to lose weight, to gain muscle, or simply feel more energized, tracking macros gives you the information you need to take control of your health and also of your performance. I like to call macro tracking a nutrition awareness method, and it's a tool that you can have at your disposal whether you use it or not. It's not about trying to restrict yourself, it's more about following a budget, the way you would do with your finances, for example. A budget helps you avoid overspending, and tracking macros helps you avoid over or under eating. So now that you understand the basics, we can get into walking you through the process of estimating your own budget for each of these macronutrients. Now, a quick note before we get started on this. This is a very rough estimate on your needs. Everyone has different needs, and there are many factors that affect your requirements. The process I will teach you apply to most healthy individuals. Now, we do this for our clients inside of our Nutrition Blueprint Coaching Program, and if you want to learn more about that and what working with a dietitian would look like, there's a link in the description for you to learn more. Now, last note, we're about to do some math in here. So I highly suggest you go grab a pen and paper to follow along, and feel free to pause this video as we go. Step number 1, we need to start calculating your energy requirements. Now, there are 2 ways to do this. A simple way and a way using an equation called Mifflin-St. Jean. For the equation option, you can just plug in your information in any online calculator. You will need your height, your weight, and your age to do this. The simple way requires simple math. You will do this by taking your current weight in pounds and multiplying that by 12 to 14. There's a range, and it's really really depends whether you're maybe a sedentary person using maybe a 12, which means you exercise less than 1 or 2 times a week, or you spend most of the day sitting. And 14, if you exercise at least 3 to 4 times a week. Let's just take an example of a female that is 150 pounds. She's a very active woman, and so we're going to use 14. So if we take 150 times 14, that gives us 2,100 calories. Here's a quick side note. If you're overweight or you have maybe at least 20 pounds to lose, maybe I recommend using your goal weight instead of your current weight. Step number 2, we need to start to create that deficit or the surplus depending on your goals for this specific number. We're going to use the deficit for the examples of this. So this is going to be for a woman who's trying to lose maybe 10 to 20 pounds. What you're going to do is you're going to subtract about 300 to 500 calories from your previous number to estimate your calorie deficit requirements. In this case, 2,100 calories minus 300, it's 1,800 calories. Now what we're left to do is calculate the macronutrient requirements on step 3. Now macros can be calculated 2 ways: through percentages of your total calorie intake or using grams per kilogram or grams per pound recommendations. The first one is usually easier. If you're calculating your macros based on percentages, I always like to start most people on a balanced breakdown. That is 40% carbs, 30% protein, and 30% fat. Let's do the simple math. If you take 40% of your 1,800 calories you need to consume and then you associate that towards carbs, that gives you 720 calories. 30% of your calories coming from protein, that is 540 calories. And 30% of calories coming from fat, that is 540 calories. Now, remember the math that I told you that you need to always remember, which is how many calories is in 1 gram of each macronutrient? Now we're going to be using that. 720 calories from carbs divided by 4, that is going to give us 180 grams of carbohydrates. 540 calories from protein divided by 4 is going to give us 135 grams of protein. And 540 calories from fat divided by 9, we're going to get 60 grams of fat. And there you have it. Those are literally the main macronutrients you need to be consuming to get 1,800 calories. A second way to do this is starting with your protein needs by multiplying your current body weight times 0.8 to 1. You can use your goal weight if you need to lose more than 20 pounds. In this case, 150 times 0.9 is 135, which is exactly the same number we got in the first method. 135 grams of protein times 4 gives us 540 calories. And now we have 1,800 calories left minus the 540 calories from the protein, leaving you with 1,260 calories left to be split between carbs and fats. If we allocate 60% towards carbs and 40% towards fat, that is going to be 760 calories for carbs and 505 calories for fats. And then you will arrive at 190 grams of carbs, which is 760 divided by 4, and 56 grams of fat, which is 505 divided by 9. Now, this is a bit more complicated, as I mentioned, so if you're new to this, the first method is always going to be easier. Okay, so now that you have some numbers for each one of those macros, now what exactly do you do with those numbers? The next step is to choose a tracking app. I personally like to use an app called Cronometer. Tracking apps are super helpful, keeping track of your macros and journal what you're eating on a daily basis. Now, I'm going to take you through the exact process on how I would track my meals. The first step comes before you put anything into your tracking app, and that's planning out some high protein meals for the week. This process takes a bit of time to explain, so if you want to learn more about it, I'm going to put a link in the description box to a video that I created that is all about meal planning. But this is the general flow that I recommend you follow when you're tracking. Number 1, plan your meals for the week, ensuring a balance of protein, carbs, and vegetables at each meal. Second, make a grocery list and shop for the food that you're going to be preparing. 3, prep any items that you can in advance. I particularly recommend prepping your protein sources in advance so you can always have something ready to go. 4, each morning, pre-track your days in your tracking app, adding in your pre-planned meals and the snacks that you already have planned to consume maybe that day. And you can adjust portion sizes of your pre-planned meals to meet your macro goals. I typically add about 60% of what I'm planning to eat for that day, so I'm sticking to my goals. And then I leave that other 40% that I didn't really log, so I have flexibility to choose other things or change what I had already planned if I needed to do that. So let me show you how I add a simple meal into Cronometer, which is the app that I personally use. But you can use other things like Lucid or MyFitnessPal. For breakfast, I logged in my overnight oats. Now for lunch, I'm going to, there's like a simple chicken salad bowl with feta cheese. For dinner, I even selected a Chick-fil-A sandwich so you can understand how flexibility can fit into all this. Now make sure that if you haven't watched my video on what I would choose as a dietitian at Chick-fil-A, make sure you go back to that as well. And for snacks, I added maybe some dark chocolate, some blueberries, and also added some Greek yogurt. And if you look at the total macros at the very top, you're gonna see where they ended up. The last step is make any necessary adjustments in your tracking app as you go through your day. So for example, maybe you added an apple to your snack or reduce a portion size in maybe one of your meals because you weren't really feeling that hungry. Now the whole goal of this video is just to show you how to track macros the right way. So to do that, I think it's important to cover some of the common mistakes that I see in people when they start doing macro tracking that usually sabotage people's goals and cause them to gain weight instead of losing it, so you can also avoid them. Here's some of the common pitfalls on macro tracking and some of the mistakes that you want to avoid. Mistake number 1, setting a very extreme calorie deficit. Many times, the default on apps like MyFitnessPal would be too low. It can also be tempting to create a large deficit to see results faster, but this almost always backfires and leads to overeating. Mistake number 2, the what the hell mentality when they go over their macros. So you start tracking your macros, and once you make a quote-unquote mistake, people decide to go overboard and not track anything, and they get back on track tomorrow, as they usually say. Mistake number 3 is having too many BLTs. And no, I'm not talking about sandwiches. I'm talking about bites, licks, and taste. These are the little mindless snacks that you have throughout the day that seem so small that you think they're just simply meaningless. For example, eating your kids' leftovers, maybe having an extra latte every day, an extra spoonful of peanut butter when you're putting it on your toast, maybe a handful of cereal whenever you just pass the kitchen, a few potato chips while you were just making dinner. Now, I want to make it clear that there isn't anything wrong with doing any of these things that I just mentioned, and each one on its own isn't going to significantly affect your progress, but these little things can add up, especially when it's multiple times a day, every day of the week. So if you feel like your weight loss has plateaued, consider taking a few days and tracking your intake very closely. This is a great way to become aware of your habits and things that you can do to be able to change them, or maybe even realize the kind of things that are keeping you from your goals. Mistake number 4 is not tracking and overeating on weekends. Take a look at this graph. If you're restrictive on weekdays and the weekends you overeat without noticing, or sometimes you do this every single day by skipping meals and being super quote-unquote diet conscious throughout the day, and then when hunger hits at night, you pound over 2,000 calories from munching on things multiple times after 8 p.m. Mistake number 5 is not paying attention to your fiber intake. As much as it's important to hit your macro goals, it's also helpful to keep an eye on fiber because it's important for managing hunger. If you find you're constantly overeating, you may need to add more higher fiber foods such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. So now that you know the general process of macro tracking and what you need to avoid if you want to count macros the right way for fat loss, the final step of this macro tracking process is simply to get started, even if you feel like you still have a lot to learn. The best way to learn this process is by doing it yourself. So download a tracking app like Chronometer, put in your macro goals, and start adding in the foods that you're eating. After a week or two of tracking, it's time to assess your progress. That means checking in with yourself and asking yourself a few questions. Are you hitting your macro goals? Are you feeling more energetic and focused? Has your weight changed? And based on your results, you can make small adjustments to your goals if you really needed to. For example, you may want to increase your total calorie target or maybe decrease it. Or you may want to increase your protein goal, which maybe it's going to be super helpful for making you feel more fuller and not overly hungry. But that is it, guys, for today. That brings us to the end of today's video. I think this was a little bit longer than usual, but I really want to encourage you to try this out today and see how it goes. There's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but after a few days of tracking, it starts to become second nature, and you realize that you can really fit anything into your macro goals to lose weight. I also want you to remember as you get started in this that the process, it doesn't have to be perfect. So you don't have to stress about it. Life happens, and that is completely okay. Even if you go over your macros, all you need to do is get back on track at your next meal or your next day. One day will not ruin your progress. Now, if you have questions about tracking, I'd be happy to answer them, so make sure you leave a comment below. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos to help you on the way to reaching your weight loss goals. I'll see you in next week's video.